Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Very Cold Lasagna podcast, your filthy casual place for all the filthy casual takes on the world of sports. I am Dylan Lasagna, and welcome back to another episode of the Icy Yet Spicy podcast, episode number 128 of this freezing cold podcast. And today, after I had some time to reflect, after I had some time to relax, after what has been a hectic January, we are here in February. Hopefully, it's less hectic. But we had a couple of days off, and now is time, especially after what has been a downer of a conference championship weekend, to reflect. Yes, this episode's all about reflecting, especially when it comes to my team, the San Francisco 49ers, as we put a bow on their 2022 season. Yeah, I almost said 2022. Yeah, 22,000 years. I kid. But anyway, in all seriousness, we're here to talk about and wrap up the San Francisco 49ers and debrief their latest season. So pretty much, it's kind of like last year. We're pretty much doing a season recap of the 49ers, pretty much before any and every other team, before the rest of the season recaps to come on Very Cold Lasagna. Why is that? Well, it's my team. I could do whatever I want. Damn it. Yeah, that's how I'm doing it. That is how I'm doing it. The 49ers first, and then everyone else is secondary. Now, had the 49ers actually won the Super Bowl, and had they, actually made it all the way, it would have been the reverse order, as customary. Just the same thing had anyone else, his team made it to the Super Bowl and won it. They would have started from the bottom to the top. Now you know where it is. I don't know what the name of that song is, but anyway, yeah, I would have done the same for my San Francisco 49ers. Unfortunately, they didn't make it to the end, so here we are. For the second straight year, we have to start with them as the very first team. And then when we get to the season recaps, it'll be all 31 teams from there. So anyway, this episode is going to be all about recapping my 49ers and their actually more interesting season than last year's. And why do I say more interesting? Well, briefly describe it. There was a lot of more drama. There was a lot of more intriguing things than last year, because last year, it just felt like it was inevitably going to end with, the limitations that our certain quarterback situation was going to bring us, and it actually ended up doing. So we're going to talk more about that. We're going to talk more about that as we go deeper and deeper into our main topic of this episode. First things first, so a little bit of housekeeping. Obviously, the next episode, which will be 129, is unfortunately, reluctantly, going to be talking about the Super Bowl between the Kansas City Chiefs and the Philadelphia Eagles. I say reluctantly because, as Niners fans, we don't want to, we really don't want to talk about this. We really want to discuss this. I mean, some Niners fans don't. I am one of those. But we have to. We cover pretty much the whole league here. So, yeah, we're going to talk about it. We're going to recap it and then move on from it. Yeah. All right. Okay. So that'll be the next two episodes, Super Bowl preview and a recap of the Chiefs and the Eagles this coming week. And yeah, other than that, before the season recaps, I'm not sure. Maybe an Elimination Chamber review, a pay-per-view review, because I am damn intrigued of that storyline. God damn it. But other than that, I'm not really sure what to expect after the Super Bowl and leading up to the season recap month. So anyway, make sure to stay tuned in to Very Cold Lasagna. Stay plugged into the social media, whether it's on Twitter and Instagram at Very Cold Lasagna. Watch or listen to the Very Cold Lasagna podcast wherever you get them. If it's on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Anchor FM, Google Podcasts. If you're listening to audio, make sure you rate and review it. If you're on YouTube, make sure you subscribe, smash the like button, smash the subscribe, comment, and yeah, Share it with your friends. Share it with a stranger. Share it with just about anybody. Spread the word about my filthy casual and honest opinions on the world of pro wrestling or football or whatever sport I decide to talk about on whenever I get on here. So anyway, let's get into our topic of the day, and that is my San Francisco 49ers and their 2022 season. I gotta say, when I talked about it last summer, I was kind of intrigued. I was kind of excited because when we went into the offseason last year, when they lost the NFC Championship game against the Rams, where they had that opportunity to actually go to the Super Bowl and face the Cincinnati Bengals, and they didn't. It was kind of gut-wrenching. It kind of was really gut-wrenching because they had that lead. They were on the cusp, like just a couple minutes away from going to the Super Bowl in their division rivals stadium, mind you, but they just couldn't. They just kind of got in their own way, and their limitations kind of got to them. Jimmy G kind of really faltered at the end. The coaching from Kyle Shanahan really got conservative, and Jaquazi Hart dropped that interception like a plain white interception. Had he not dropped that, then I think that the Niners could have sealed it. And especially considering Cincinnati's offensive line situation at the moment, at that time, I think the Niners could have won that Super Bowl. Maybe they could have been Super Bowl repeat Super Bowl champions by now. I'm gonna say it right there. But anyway, this is the now, obviously, and then you went to this offseason. You went to this season. Obviously, the main thing when I talked about this, you want to see what you had in Trey Lance. You want to see what you had in a lot of players. How is the defense going to be? I had some concerns about the offensive line because they didn't really heavily invest in that because they lost a good guard in Lincoln Tomlinson in free agency, and yes, now you're going into year two pretty much with Trey Lance, who didn't really play all that much, only playing like 2 games in relief of Jimmy G, going 1-1. But yeah, despite the offseason work and training camp where we was kind of like so, like we were really about to see what he was gonna look like, with pretty much no Jimmy G on his back. But oh wait, yeah, they didn't. The Niners didn't get rid of Jimmy Garoppolo because, well, the Niners pretty much found out that Jimmy G was injured for pretty much the duration of their playoff run, and now they find out on the cusp of free agency, on the cusp of the new league year starting, that, well, he's injured. He had to go get surgery, and he got shoulder surgery. So now they were stuck with him. They couldn't trade him. They couldn't release him. Otherwise, he was going to get injury guarantees. And they could have released him before the roster cut down, but nope, they decided to keep him. So, yeah, that's more money down the drain for the 49ers as they held on to him. But hey, it is what it is. So now Trey Lance even had a bigger monkey on his back because, well, Jimmy G was back on the team, despite not having training camp, not having OTAs or whatnot. But hey, you go into the season, people like me have at least some reasonable expectations, hoping that Trey Lance would do good. So you get to the season. You start off in Chicago, playing against the Bears, who are in the middle of a rebuild. You got a year 2 quarterback, also in Justin Fields. Should have been an exciting matchup, right? Well, yeah. Trey Lance did show some solid signs early on. Put a solid throws to Brandon Ayuk. But the problem was, most of the time they didn't look like they were ready to play. Especially the early play calling. Had him run the ball way too many times. Like he was like Lamar Jackson. Like there was a lot of too many design runs. Just like in his rookie year in Arizona. They were calling a lot. Kyle Shanahan was calling a lot of design runs, preventing him from throwing the damn ball. It's like, let him throw. Let him throw. The Bears and their offensive coordinator, whatever his face was, they're letting Justin Fields throw the ball. And even as the weather got worse, Kyle Shanahan refused to let Trey throw the damn ball, but yet in the worst, as the rain started getting heavier and heavier, they let Justin Fields throw the ball. So what was the problem? They didn't let Trey throw the damn ball. So that amplified the Trey haters, the naysayers, and further encouraged the Jimmy G lovers to like, oh, hey, Trey can't play. Let's bring back Jimmy G as the starter. So the Niners lose a stinker to Chicago in a monsoon weather against the Bears in bear weather. So they start 0-1 to the season. And yeah, the defense also didn't really have a necessarily good performance as they got worn down in bear weather. And yeah, they also won their season opener, their home opener the next week, which I was at. But it actually got worse for them because, you know, despite being the Seahawks in kind of blowout fashion, yeah, they lose their starting quarterback, Trey Lance, for the season. He suffered a fractured ankle because of, guess why? Design quarterback run by Shanahan. Like, you would think that Kyle Shanahan would finally let him throw the damn ball, despite more rainy weather. And when I was at that game, yes, it was raining, but not as bad as Chicago rain, where it was like heavy downpour, and not the same rain that you get in the winter, where it's like such a bad downpour that you want to go inside. And not the same rainy weather that when the Niners played the Colts, that Jimmy G was so damn scared to throw the damn ball. Unlike Carson Wentz, he was throwing that damn thing in the rain. But nope, Kyle Shanahan decides to call a QB power run between the tackles, and then guess what? Trey Lance gets hurt. He gets squashed in between the tackles, and he fractures his ankle. So, fuck. So the worst situation kind of comes to fruition, and both the players and the fan base, yes, the players were kind of sucked sad to see Trey Lance go down, but they were more elated to have the golden boy, Jimmy Garoppolo, back. And yeah, Jimmy G did help the Niners lead the way, more so the running game though, and the defense to that victory against Seattle. But it just went to show that the Niners fan base appreciated Jimmy G more than Trey Lance, and Kyle Shanahan appreciated Jimmy G more than Trey Lance, despite, well, not opening up the playbook for Trey Lance more. All he wanted to do is like, hey, let's treat him like RG3. Let's treat him like Lamar Jackson. Let's make him run the damn ball into the ground until he literally gets ran into the ground. Like, what kind of coach is that? Like, I still stand by this. I still stand by this. Like, Kyle Shanahan, like, for as good as a play caller he can be sometimes, I feel like he can get his quarterbacks hurt. Especially with an offensive line. It's just like, oh my God. Well, more on that later. So anyway, Trey Lance is out for the season. Now, you have to turn back to Jimmy Garoppolo. Everyone's excited. Everyone's thinking at that time is like, oh, Jimmy G is going to lead them back to the promised land. Jimmy G is going to lead them back to the NFC Championship game and then take them to the Super Bowl. Yeah, pal. Oh, yeah. Jimmy G, with this offense, is going to be electric. And then Jimmy G's return in Denver in prime time was so goddamn awful. Yes, the defense kept the Broncos' equally bad offense, with Russell Wilson, mind you, in check. But the offense literally undid that all game. They cratered with Jimmy G, initially at least. And you noticed during that game that the offensive line started showing cracks in that game. Mike McGlinchey couldn't block, couldn't pass protect. And then, yeah, there were some growing pains in that in that game as well. But it's at the same time, it was just like, oh man, it was going to be a reckoning to come much later in the season. Notably the interior and right tackle. And then we all remember, of course, what Jimmy G did in that game, pulling a Dan Orlovsky. So you go 1-2 on the season. Yeah, you beat the Rams. You beat the Panthers. I mean, you always beat the Rams. They suck. So then you decide to follow that up by embarrassingly losing 2 straight games to the Atlanta Falcons, which they should have won, despite being beaten up, injured. And then you lose to the Chiefs in blowout fashion. Now, in fairness, like I said, in the Falcons loss, the Niners dealt with injury woes from the Panthers game, despite easily beating them. Yet, Kyle Shanahan decided to keep his starters in with, 10 minutes into the game? He was like, up big. The Panthers were already down big. Why did he need to keep his starters? I don't know. But all we remember was that they lost starting corner Emmanuel Moseley to a torn ACL. Why? Well, because Kyle Shanahan decided to keep him in there. It made no sense. It really made no sense. They could have put in Ambry Thomas or Diomondre Lenoir at the time. But no. Shanahan was like, your ass is staying out there. And, well, oops. When he saw the torn ACL, it's like, oops. So, a lot of other stars got dinged up in that game, and that's why, well, they lost that Falcons game. Yeah, blown out by Marcus Mariota and the Falcons. And then the Chiefs game, once most of their players started coming back, well, they were less than healthy. But even then, they couldn't find a way to pressure up Patrick Mahomes, and their offense, the 49ers offense, was just pretty shitty. They had a pretty shitty game. And that game was actually notable for, well, a trade acquisition that the Niners made prior to the deadline. Personally, well, we're going to talk about this right now. Personally, at the trade deadline, because of what just happened in the Falcons game, and, well, even in those wins, there was a little bit of concern there. Personally, they needed to address the corner spot, either that because of the Emmanuel Moseley injury, or the offensive line, because, yeah, the right side was very, very inconsistent. Mike McGlinchey could either be a okay pass blocker, or he can be really bad with penalties, or just flat out missing his assignment. And Spencer Burford on right guard, I mean, he's still kind of growing. He's still having his he's still a rookie. He's still growing, but at the same time, you kind of need help for him. Meanwhile, at the center position, Jake Brendel, I mean, he's actually okay, but not spectacular. But instead, John Lynch elected to trade for Pro Bowl running back Christian McCaffrey from the Carolina Panthers. Kind of ironic because you know how he is. You know how he plays because, well, the Niners just played the Panthers literally 2 weeks before they made the trade. So he's pretty familiar. And he's from Stanford. So that was pretty cool. But in return, they had to give up a chunk of future second and third round picks. And as he got familiar with the playbook, he immediately made his presence felt in Week 8 in a rematch of the NFC title game against the Rams. And Jimmy G actually had one of his best career games, as the addition of McCaffrey pretty much made the offense a dominant quadruplet, quiplet, however you put it. The offense was just on another level. Now, you can either say that, or the Rams were just so beaten up by that point that they were just god-awful. So either way, McCaffrey's presence, whether it was as a runner outside, or as a receiver, or even as a passer, as a quarterback, was so into another gear that the Niners ran the Rams out of the building before the bye week, and they seemed like they had all the confidence in the world. And after the bye week, yeah, inconsistency would persist with Jimmy G. He would either have like a game where he couldn't move the field or he would have to rely on the running game. But the Niners defensive front, at least, which would have a string of second half shutouts, a string being able to relentlessly pressure the quarterback, relentlessly sack the quarterback, relentlessly create turnovers, notably by Nick Bosa, who was having a defensive player of the year kind of year, and an interior line that was missing Eric Armstead for half of the year. But you had that strong rotation that had guys like Kerry Hyder, Charles Omenihu, Samsu Ebukam, Drake Jackson. So when you had that defensive front, that was so strong. I mean, it was keeping you in games, and it was forcing opposing quarterbacks into mistakes. So they went on this 4-game winning streak, heading into a big Week 13 matchup against the Miami Dolphins. But unfortunately, for the Niners, it seemed like their season was really gonna derail. Their season was really gonna fall off a cliff by that point, and not even into the first quarter of that game against the Dolphins, because, well, they would lose yet another quarterback. They would lose Jimmy Garoppolo. Yes, for as much as I trash Jimmy G, it's like it really was a downer. It really was shit when he went down to a season-ending foot injury. So that was awful to see. They lost Jimmy G on a sack sandwich on the opening drive. But it's like like I said, the pass protection was awful. The pass protection had been awful pretty much all year up to that point. And now, with nowhere else to turn in that game, Kyle Shanahan was pretty much forced to call upon his third-string quarterback. And who is that third-string quarterback? The very last pick of the 2022 NFL Draft, rookie, Mr. Irrelevant. What was his name? Kind of rings a bell. Oh, yeah. How's the Paul? Oh, I guess it's Paul Heyman's new client. Oh, his new Mr. Irrelevant. The new, not so tribal chief, Brock Purdy. Yeah, Brock Purdy, Mr. Irrelevant, but he actually has some starting experience. What school? I don't remember what school, but either way, I'm sorry. Should have kind of remembered that. But anyway, Brock Purdy actually had some starting experience, despite being the very last pick in the NFL draft, and it showed early on. Stepped up real nicely despite constant pressure in his face, barely in a protection from his offensive line. And you saw early and often in that Dolphins game, a huge difference from Purdy and Jimmy G was Purdy's willingness to go outside the pocket, be more aggressive downfield, throw it into some really tight windows to his receivers, despite his lack of arm strength and these real off the cusp throws, like his willingness to not give up on the play, even though he kind of should. But yeah, that game, the defense really helped them out, and yeah, they won a big blowout win against Tua and the Dolphins. And yeah, some people would say that, oh, it was just a fluke win. Purdy came in, the defense won it for him, and yeah, in fairness, that was true. But now with Jimmy G out for the season as well, along with Trey Lance, who was already out, yeah, suddenly Mr. Irrelevant was relevant. And now going into a big game, Week 14, against, well, a guy that was one of the best to ever do it, a 7-time Super Bowl champion, hometown kid, Tom Brady. Brock Purdy was about to face already a tall task to trying down Tom Brady and the Tampa Bay Bucks. And surprisingly, he outdueled them. He outdueled Brady, and yeah, I guess in fairness, Brady is not in his best year. It was not in his best year in his because a final year now. So he played against an incomplete Bucks defense and didn't have all of his starters and some of its reserves. So, but either way, he made an already strong Niners offense even more dangerous and made a really good first impression. And the defense really let Brady suck. They gift drafted them free turnovers, one after the other, into another surprising blowout win that wrapped up the 3-game homestand. So the Niners suddenly on a roll, suddenly looked even better than before on offense. And that spotlight on Purdy continued to shine as they went into Seattle for a big Thursday night matchup with an opportunity to seal the NFC West in Seattle. And Purdy continued to, despite not having as well as a performance against the Bucs, he did what he needed to do. Came up in clutch to seal the game alongside Christian McCaffrey and Jordan Mason to clinch the NFC West in Seattle, mind you. Their first division clinching title win in Seattle since 2019, but their first season sweep since 2011. And now the focus from that point on was to play for the number 2 seed. And they did have an opportunity to clinch the number 1 seed from Philadelphia, but obviously the main goal was getting Brock Purdy postseason ready. By that point, he only had played two games, and one of them was a meaningful game in Seattle. So the rest of the way, sure, you want to get that number 1 seed, but also at the same time, you want to make sure that Brock Purdy's ready for any kind of situation that some of these teams like the Cowboys, that the Eagles, hell, even other wildcard teams like Giants could present to you. So, the biggest example was the New Year's Day matchup against the Jared Stidham Las Vegas Raiders. The Niners had a shit ton of trouble defensively on how to stop Stidham, who was filling in for Derek Carr because, well, Carr was well on his way out. Like they're either going to trade him or release him. They shut him down for the season. But Purdy stepped up well in adversity. Granted, the Raiders defense is not that great. But he did well. Often finding his guys, Ayuk, Kittle, McCaffrey. But the defense really started showing its lapses against mobile quarterbacks, against the deep ball. It showed its flaws. If they can't get in coverage right, if there wasn't pressure. But luckily in overtime, Nick Bosa got that turnover, got that clutch pressure to force a turnover, and got them a step closer to clinching the number 2 seed, which they did against the hapless Cardinals at home. So the Niners ended their season 13-4, clinched the number 2 seed in the NFC playoffs. Now, honestly, they could have been the number 1 seed in the NFC, but yeah, those losses to the Bears, those losses to the Broncos, those losses to the Falcons added up. They really added up at the end of the day. Especially considering that, well, yeah, that Atlanta loss, that could have helped. That had they won that game, it could have made a difference. It really could have made a difference. It really could have made a difference for the 49ers in tie-breaking scenarios at the end of the day. But either way, yeah, at least the Niners got 2 home playoff games. They need some things to go their way for playoff matchups after the wildcard game because, well, for some people, the worst thing that could have happened was to face Philadelphia in the NFC title game in Philadelphia, and some bad things to happen over there. Oh, you just wait. So the playoffs, the Niners going in, the number 2 seed, the hottest team in the NFL, one of them at least, and the playoffs were always expected to be a challenge, a different animal for the Brock Purdy led Niners. And at the same time, they needed to be ready at all aspects, but they didn't feel that way in the first half of that wildcard game against the Seahawks. At least for Purdy, it was understandable. He only started 5.5 games in late in the season, and well, it was his first playoff game. He was only a rookie. He was the last pick in the NFL draft, and yeah, when you saw him throw a lot of rushed balls. The offensive line was collapsing around him. He was making a lot of very quick decisions, and albeit or kind of poor ones. It's kind of understandable. It's kind of understandable where it was coming from. But yeah, the rest of the team though, like the offensive line, the defense, allowing DK Metcalf and Kenneth Walker to easily attack them, and Geno Smith too. Yeah, that was unacceptable. That was unacceptable. But, Charles Omenihu forcing a red zone turnover in the third quarter, that sparked the tide. That sparked the change the Niners needed. They outscored Seattle 18-6. Both sides got another gear for the 49ers, and they pounded the pudding out of the Seahawks and boat raced them out of the playoffs. So Niners went on to face the Cowboys in the divisional round because, well, the Bucs absolutely were terrible in their wild card game. So, and then the Giants, well, they beat the brakes out of the Vikings in a close one because, well, the Vikings had no defense. So they got a trip to Philadelphia and easily got their shit canned in by the Eagles. So this game between the Niners and the Cowboys was going to decide who was going to face the Eagles in the NFC Championship game. And man, this was Purdy's biggest test yet. He was facing a top 5 defense with a very strong pass rushing unit. However, the key was here, this Dallas team was coming off a very short week. They were playing the Monday night game to close out Super Wildcard weekend, and they didn't have much time to rest up. They didn't have much time to practice, so they were pretty much going in just like head on. And as expected, despite all that, the offensive line had a very difficult time containing that Cowboys strong pass rushing unit. Purdy had a lot of difficult time getting throws in. But fortunately for the 49ers and their defense, the defense, again, came in strong and crumbled Dak Prescott under pressure. They forced 2 turnovers, and they managed to hold on to some weird shenanigans by the Cowboys, and they went on to advance to their second consecutive NFC title game. But unlike last year where they were seen as at least an opportunist against the Rams, this time around against the Philadelphia Eagles, they were seen as given no chance at all. And that's because, well, despite being as well balanced as the Philadelphia Eagles, the one main advantage was the quarterback. Jalen Hurts, more well-rounded, had an MVP candidate-like year compared to Brock Purdy. Only, 6.5 starts and not much experience under his belt. And, well, unfortunately for the 49ers, it ended up exactly that way, except entirely for different reasons. The 2 big keys of the game in that title game were Kyle Shanahan failing to challenge while impressive, a one-handed Devontae Smith catch on 4th down, a deep ball that ended up being incomplete. And then on the 49ers' very first offensive series of the game, Kyle Shanahan decided to have backup tight end Tyler Koff tried to block one of the top pass rushers in Hassan Reddick. And yeah, guess where this is headed. When that failed miserably, Purdy got his throwing arm hit by Reddick, and when that caused a fumble, Purdy was taken to the blue tent. He was never put back in the game. He stayed on the sideline for the rest of the first half, forcing the 49ers to go with their 4th and final quarterback, Josh Johnson. So Purdy suffered an apparent elbow injury in his throwing arm. So rather than stick with Mike McGlinchey, or at least have both McGlinchey and Croft block Reddick, Shanahan decided to have his backup tight end that can't block try to go against one of the best pass rushers in Eagles. So as a result, Shanahan again got one of his quarterbacks hurt. And yeah, it can, in fairness, it also be Purdy got himself hurt. But it was the play design too. So from there, the Niners basically had no chance. The defense at least put up a fight. They pretty much limited the Eagles' air attack. Jalen Hurts didn't really do much after that big long bomb catch to Devontae Smith. It was pretty much the running game of the Eagles that did the damage, and ref ball showing clear and obvious bias towards the Eagles, and the Niners' frustrations boiling so bad because of the ref ball. Josh Johnson also got knocked out of the game with a concussion, so that forced Brock Purdy to come back in and pretty much hand the ball off. The Niners' offense couldn't do anything. So it's not, like I said, it wasn't like, you can't do it like Mutant Football League where if you run out of quarterbacks, you automatically forfeit the game. I guess the referees, the NFL, were like, nope, you don't get a forfeit option. You don't get an automatic forfeit L. You have to let the Philadelphia Eagles sink it in. You have to let it drag out until the game is officially over. So, yeah, the season for the 49ers eventually ended with Trent Williams getting ejected, a big fight happening, and, well, the overall season for the 49ers ended even worse than it did last year against the Rams in a kind of blowout-ish and gut-wrenching loss in a disappointing one to the Philadelphia Eagles, an injury-riddled one, and, yeah, they were sent home packing yet again. So, when I look at this overall season for the 49ers, you know, they actually had a really good shot at winning the Super Bowl. You know, had they stayed healthy, though, had they not had this quarterback conundrum, Trey Lance could have provided some upside for the Niners offense the more he played. And also had been the play calling been better, not like Kyle Shanahan trying to make him like RG3 or Lamar Jackson 5.0 and not running him into the ground, like running him between the tackles so damn much like he constantly had. And then obviously Jimmy G, while for as inconsistent and as much as I rag on him, he actually did have a pretty solid year. And the addition of Christian McCaffrey really did him wonders. I gotta admit that. It's just, yeah, again, unfortunate that he got hurt as well. And then obviously the biggest story of the year is Brock Purdy. He is Mr. Irrelevant, the last pick in the draft, but he had a lot more starting experience than Trey Lance did. And he managed to take the offense to another level, make them even more threatening, despite a flaw in his arm strength. So Purdy, like, has shown he can be a serious challenger to Trey Lance at the starting spot. The only thing is that how long is he going to be out? How long is his recovery time going to be from that? What ended up being a UCL, like an elbow injury that baseball players often suffer. So how long is he going to be out? And then for as kind of iffy as they've been with the Christian McCaffrey trade, it's definitely paid off. It's more than paid off. The only thing I was kind of like iffy about the Christian McCaffrey trade was his health the last couple of seasons. But he has managed to stay healthy. He's managed to manage his minor injuries. And obviously, he was recently in the Pro Bowl, so that was a good sign. I mean, I guess him playing in the Pro Bowl briefly. I just wish Kyle Shanahan keeps him playing him as a receiver and as a runner outside the tackles. And then Brandon Ayuk, one of the standout players, one of the go-to targets, aside from McCaffrey. And George Kittle really had himself a resurgent year late in the season, which was further amplified by the emergence of Purdy. And then defensively, notably the front seven was pretty damn good. It's just, unfortunate that, if Nick Bosa, even though he was pretty much a one-man wrecking crew, yeah, Nick Bosa was, when he got doubled up, where was the rest of the pass rush? And I just wish that they used Drake Jackson more, and hopefully he works more on this conditioning during the offseason. Overall, it was just very unfortunate that they weren't given a fair shot in the NFC title game, especially that was further amplified with Brock Purdy's injury. And now we're just left with one big what if. Like, had Purdy not gotten injured, the defense stayed disciplined, things gone more of their way. Kyle Shanahan challenged that play call. Like, even if he didn't get the right angle on the big screen, I think they would have actually gotten a shot at upsetting the Eagles. Because, just like I said, with the defense, after that first giving up deep shot, they didn't let Jalen Hurts do shit in the air after that. Like, literally, they didn't let him do shit after that big bomb to Devontae Smith. Now, is that guaranteed that they would have? No, but they found a key to success for that. He was pretty much overthrowing his guys after that with relentless pressure, and actually gave the Chiefs an idea of how to contain him. So overall, it was a kind of successful season for the 49ers, and I say kind of successful because yes, they went 13-4. They won the division, but it was just a very disappointing way to end their season on a very down note in the NFC title game with the injuries to Purdy and Josh Johnson. And they had a good shot to win it all, and it's just unfortunate that those injuries went against them. Now, looking ahead to their offseason, they have some things that, actually a lot of things, that needs to be addressed. Obviously, the thing that's been breaking around them is, well, their defensive coordinator. They don't have a defensive coordinator at this time because, well, their former one, DeMeco Ryans, is now in Houston, back with this old team, the Texans. Why is that? Well, he's their new head coach for 6 years. Like, that's insane. He's kind of insane for that. So, either way, now the Niners are going to have to find DeMeco Ryans' successor, whether it's in-house or somewhere like outside the organization. But so the Niners got to find someone, whether it's Steve Wilks or Chris Koshek. Those are the names that have been thrown around. But either way, if they fit the system, or as long as they're good as Robert Saleh and DeMeco were, then that's fine with me. In terms of free agency and the draft, well, the Niners have around $16 million to spend. It's not a lot because, well, they gave these big fat contracts in the last several years. And, well, they're pretty much near the red. So that leaves them with barely any cap space left. And they have a lot of decisions to make. Some of those unrestricted free agents include Jimmy Garoppolo, offensive lineman Daniel Brunskill, center Jake Brendel, tackle Mike McGlinchey, defensive end Spencer Ebcom, Kerry Hyder Jr. and Charles Omenihu, safety Jimmy Ward, corner Emmanuel Mosley, and kicker Robbie Gould. And then you have an exclusive rights free agent in receiver Juwan Jennings. So, yeah, you got a lot of free agents here coming up next month. So, for the Niners, those are a lot of key free agents right there. Yes, there's another extensive list, but in my opinion, these are the key people that I see in my mind that the Niners are going to try to see worth keeping. Now, in terms of their other needs to address, obviously the top need, aside from finding a defensive coordinator to replace DeMeco Ryans, is the offensive line. Because the offensive line was so damn putrid. Because it was Trent Williams and Aaron Banks on the left, and that's it. Drake Brendel, I mean, he was okay. And Spencer Burford, I mean, again, still a rookie. But McGlinchey was awful, especially in pass protection. Run blocking was all right. Pass protection was awful. It's time to find better options out there. Their center, Bradley Bozeman. Right tackle is George Fant or Jawan Taylor. and guard JC Davis. If they're there for the right price, go grab them. If they're not, if neither of them are there, find someone in the draft. Either way, the Niners gotta invest big in the offensive line so they can protect their quarterbacks, whether it's Trey or Brock, because these injuries to the quarterback position cannot keep happening in the last couple of years that's been happening. It just can't. Meanwhile, speaking of quarterback, you got to find a backup quarterback while Brock Purdy's out. We don't know how long he's going to be out. Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch said in their exit presser that he could be out for 6 months. I mean, that's good. At least he could be out for training camp, but you don't know what option that he have, which could be the worst case scenario, like Tommy John surgery, which is like 9 months to a year, and then the recovery on top of that. So that's the worst case scenario. Then the Niners are going to have to bring in a reliable backup option to go alongside Trey Lance while Brock Purdy is recovering. Names like Taylor Heineke, Mike White, Andy Dalton, hell, even Baker Mayfield should be all on the Niners' radar. Now, remember, these aren't people that will be competing with Trey Lance to be the starter during the offseason program in training camp, unless Trey Lance really struggles. These are just names to sit behind Lance and, yeah, just in the event that he gets hurt again because, well, of the incompetency of the Niners not providing any damn protection on the offensive line. That's purely that. And then, obviously, the big talk is around Nick Bosa and his contract extension. A lot of it's going to depend on how much he wants. And when it gets done. So, as long as they reach a contract extension with Nick Bosa, hopefully it's not too much, I'm good with it. And then you got to find another edge rusher opposite Nick Bosa. And, yeah, we have Drake Jackson. And maybe you could re-sign Samson Ebicom. But I feel like hopefully Drake Jackson improves his conditioning. Or even then, maybe you can find someone in the draft to go alongside Bosa and then rotate between Jackson and that rookie edge rusher. Find somebody because Nick Bosa needs help. He can't do it by himself. And that includes the interior defensive line. Get a defensive tackle. Because, well, Javon Kinlaw has proven that he can't stay healthy, and he even when he is on the field healthy, he can't produce. Just look at the tape of how abysmal he was during the NFC title game against the Eagles. He couldn't get to Jalen Hurts. He's just like whiffing around. So anyway, the Niners can look towards the draft in investing at the interior defensive line, at least depth-wise, as well as the cornerback position. Maybe re-signing Emmanuel Mosley. They can get him on a cheap deal since he tore his ACL. Maybe he wants to also get a cheap deal to prove himself to the Niners or to other teams next offseason. So maybe he takes a cheap deal, but I don't know. But either way, you want to make sure you have at least some depth behind himself, either himself or whatever starting spot that's opposite Charvarius Ward, who also could use some help in terms of depth. Diemondre Lenore was solid, but not spectacular in coverage, especially in the playoffs. Ambry Thomas, you didn't see much of him on the field. And then they also drafted Samuel Womack. I mean, he had some flashes, but he was mainly used on special teams. I would like to see him more in the rotation next season. Perhaps they could find a gem or two in the later rounds when they pick, and then they start having a competition on who could be behind Ward and Emmanuel Mosley if he resigns, or maybe who could be the starting corner if Mosley doesn't resign. But either way, they could certainly use some depth at the interior defensive line and the cornerback spot because, yeah, for as good as that defense was in 2022, their passing defense, their passing defense, especially downfield, was really poor. They could not stop downfield receivers. It was that bad. So overall, I mean, to end this episode, the Niners they actually, like I said, they did have a chance to go to the Super Bowl, even with their third string quarterback in Brock Purdy, who could have made history. He could have been the first Mr. Irrelevant, the first last pick in the NFL draft to go to the Super Bowl, and actually had a chance. Could have had a chance to win the Super Bowl, whether it was against the Chiefs or against the Bengals. Is it too much of a stretch of imagination? Not really, even against Patrick Mahomes. But either way, they had an opportunity to get to the Super Bowl and potentially win it. It's, again, just unfortunate that Brock Purdy got hurt. Now, you don't know if and when he's going to be back. I mean, yeah, he will be back, but when will he be back? Is it going to be 6 months? A year? Who knows? And then now you have questions about, well, Trey Lance. Can he stay healthy? He'll be ready by OTAs, but the question will be, can he stay healthy? And obviously, you have a lot more things to be worried about too besides the quarterback. Offensive line, finding a defensive coordinator, extending Nick Bosa, all of which you have little cap space for, and not a whole lot of draft picks too. Sure, you're getting compensatory picks, but that's late in day 2, and then the rest of day 3. The Niners have at least done a good job at finding some gems in the later rounds of the draft, but this offseason, they really need to nail it because, yeah, there's literally not really many coaches in the league that can replace Kyle Shanahan, but at some point in time, like, you really have to start thinking and wondering, like, is Kyle Shanahan, like, can Kyle Shanahan finally lead the Niners to a Super Bowl victory in the next couple of years eventually? I mean, it's going to happen eventually, right? Because we keep getting to the NFC Championship game, but it's like, well, it's just like too close, but no cigar. So there's some things that I like about Kyle Shanahan, but it's just like, well, we're just not close enough. So at some point in time, it's just like you really have to think about it. But overall, I mean, it's still a much better and more exciting season than last year was. It's just, again, unfortunate that it ended the way it did. But it is what it is now. And hopefully the Niners will, what is that saying that Seth Rollins always says, like back in the day? Redesign, rebuild, and reclaim. Hopefully next season will be a much better one. So anyway, that is your San Francisco 49ers of the 2022 season, putting a wrap on everything regarding the 2022 49ers. So, yeah, that is pretty much it for my coverage of the 49ers for this season, pretty much for now, unless, some crazy thing happens with them in the offseason, free agency. Obviously, we'll be doing some draft stuff with them. But until then, I'm pretty much done talking about the 49ers. Again, unless some crazy shit happens with the 49ers. But obviously, we're not done talking about the NFL. There's still some things to settle. But the Niners are pretty much finito until, the draft and other stuff this offseason. But anyway, this is Dylan Lasagna of Very Cold Lasagna. And let me know your thoughts on how the 49ers did this season. And let me know how you think they'll do this offseason and next season and in the long-term future. I'd like to know your input on them, whether you're a fan of them or not. So anyway, this is Dylan Lasagna of Very Cold Lasagna. And thank you for tuning in to episode number 128 of this icy yet spicy podcast. And keep that lasagna very cold in the fridge with your takes on the world of sports. And until next time, peace out.